12 classes. And this is an interesting group because most of the people here have not been in the earlier classes. So this is going to be a little different than what we might normally do for the inner group, just because there's a lot of catching up to do as far as where we're coming from. So I'm going to have to, I think, start with a basic introduction as to the type of material that we are covering. In dealing with the Gordian Alliance, I have two books coming out. One of them deals with alien abduction. One of them deals with the process of dimensional ascension. So there's a large span of information that we cover. Now the classes that you are in one of them tonight, these were very specific classes. They were not about alien abduction, and they are about something called DNA activation. And as I've said, this is class 5. So we've had the basics of the structure of DNA as presented in the format from the Gordian Alliance. I'm not going to be able to go over and rehash all of that material tonight, because if I do, we'll never get to the material that was supposed to be covered for the people who are ready for class 5 tonight. There are the videos from the earlier classes that if you want to catch up, you can. But what I'll try to do is present this level of material, which deals with morphogenetic fields. I will try to present it in a way that hopefully you can plug into, even though you don't have, the other information behind you. This is going to be a challenge for me tonight. I think what I need to start with, and this will be pretty much on the protocol of the handouts that I gave you, I'm going to discuss a bit about evolution and what human evolution really is. We've covered this in the earlier classes, but not really extensively. We touched on it and then bounced over to other things. When our scientists talk about evolution, it seems to be, at least when I perceive it, this very abstract process. There are theories floating around. We have survival of the fittest and those kind of theories. There's not a real cohesive theory about what is evolution, what is the process of evolution. Because if we knew the answers to these things, we would also know the answers as to why we are here, where we came from, and what the purpose of evolution is. And since right now, in our time period, those questions are not particularly answerable to your average person, the question of what is evolution, how does it occur, what does it mean, that's also an open-ended question. Now, in my dealings with the Gordian Alliance, and I have been dealing with them for 27 years, ever since I was a child, I was taught in a framework of belief that answered some of the unanswerable questions. The concept of human evolution was presented to me in a very unique framework, and it's the framework that we now teach. Evolution, according to the Gordian Alliance, which is the Gordian Alliance is a very large organization. It has beings from other dimensional fields, and some of them are physical, some of them are humans, but many of them are what we would consider extraterrestrial. They're from levels of what we call higher evolution that humans here don't even know exist. When they explained to me how evolution worked, I was very, very fascinated, because they did have an answer to the question, what is evolution? They had a very specific answer. Their answer to me was, evolution is the process of dimensional ascension. What's dimensional ascension? Okay, before you can understand dimensional ascension, you need to understand what dimensions are, how many of them are there, how do they relate to each other. In the work of the Gordian Alliance, all this information has been provided. We are dealing with the structure of 24 15-dimensional matrices that compose, each of them are composed of 5 harmonic universes. So here's a structure. Here's a structure our scientists haven't really even attempted to explore. They might get there at some point. Now within that structure, what would evolution mean? If we're not just what we see before our eyes, if we're not dealing with a reality field that is just the 3-dimensional earth life that we perceive, what else might we be dealing with? Now, I have learned with my experiences with the Gordian Alliance that their information is true. I don't expect anybody else to believe it offhand, yet when you follow it for a while and you see the logic behind it, it's hard to argue with it after a while. And then you start to remember things. When it starts to trigger your own memory, you start to realize there's something to this. So the program of evolution is very, very interesting. If evolution is the process of dimensional ascension, that implies that we are moving upward in some type of dimensional scale. Well, the dimensional scale is 15 dimensions, and you can picture it as an egg, and that egg has 15 dimensions stacked from 1 up through 15, with a center point, which would represent the 8th dimension. Now, the dimensions in a 15-dimensional matrix are structured into triads. 3 dimensions go together to create a 3-dimensional reality system, just like we have here. There are different levels of these. So in a 15-dimensional matrix, you would have 5 harmonic universes, which are 3-dimensional systems. And this is the structure of evolution we are dealing with. For we are beings, and our planet is a planetary body that is evolving within this structure. When we complete our evolution here, there are places to go beyond here, many of them. If we are in harmonic universe 1, which would be the dimensions of 1, 2, and 3, we still have the dimensions of 4 through 15 to evolve through, and then maybe some. And there is some after that, but they're not dimensionalized anymore. So there's a whole framework going on here that, from my experience of seeing models of universal structure, this is unique to my experience from reviewing what is available out here. I find it very, very helpful because it helped me to understand what it means to be a being here now and what my evolutionary process is. Now, in the process of evolving through a 15-dimensional scale, the DNA has a large part to do with this. And this is an interesting concept because there are many people that are very spiritual people who are aware that there are higher universes to evolve into. They might call them heaven or, God worlds or something like that. But they're aware of a higher level of evolution. Yet many of them absolutely refuse to acknowledge the concept of DNA and biology having anything to do with this. It's almost as if we have to sever our body and our consciousness completely in order to be an evolving being. And this is not the way it works. The way it works is actually rather exciting. Evolution of our spirituality, of our consciousness, which would be expansion from what it is now. That would be evolving to expand and become more, and de-evolving would be becoming less and fragmenting. Now, as we're expanding our consciousness as spiritual beings, we are also affecting our DNA. And this is something that some groups out there are aware of in the New Age movement and that kind of thing, but not a lot of them are. The DNA is a transducer of frequency. It's the first manifestation step between an energy imprint that serves as a blueprint and the manifestation of physical particles that flesh out a physical body. So DNA is important in the process of evolution. In the classes that we've been doing, we've gotten into the structure of the DNA. We've basically identified that once upon a time in a place kind of far away, many, many years ago, 560 million years ago, to be exact, almost, we were a race of beings. We did not start on this planet. We did not come from apes. We came from a level of higher evolution. And we had a genetic code that had 12 strands of DNA activated within it. That 12-strand pattern is called the silicate matrix. And the silicate matrix still remains as a dormant potential within the humans of today. That's what these classes are about. We have the abilities within us, if we can understand what the process of DNA evolution and how that applies to our consciousness, if we can understand this process, we can bring those potentials of 12 strands of DNA back into activation. Now, we have 2 identified strands, as far as our scientific community knows. And we attribute things, the genetic characteristics, eye color, hair color, disease sometimes, to genetic factors. There are levels of DNA structure that are even below that. There are base structures of DNA. And when we get into this, we're getting into something called chelantic morphogenetic science. It's the science of morphogenetic fields. Morphogenetic fields are the form-holding blueprints that create grids of electromagnetic energy upon which matter particles can compose themselves to form matter forms. So when we're dealing with our DNA, we are dealing with a level that's even below that is the morphogenetic field. In the course that we're going to do today, there was some very interesting new information given to me, and that's why I'm excited to present it to the people who've had the material from before, and I'm trying to figure out how to present it to the people who haven't, because it's the next level up. very quickly speaking, in the silicate matrix, which we are trying to activate in our DNA through these classes, there are 12 strands of DNA. They are double heli. You have one magnetic heli and one electrical heli. So you have 12 of those. That's the basic structure. Most of them are dormant right now. Most of us on the planet right now have what an accretion level, which is the DNA activation level, of between 3 and 3.5. Our scientists see 1 double helix. That is because there are particles that vibrate at a different angle of rotation and vibrate at a slower pulse than our particles in our perceptual field and the perceptual field of our instruments, and there are ones that vibrate higher. DNA is stacked in an overlay form, and you will only be able to perceive from any one system the portions of the particles that vibrate within that system. So right now, we don't have the instrumentation here. Well, actually we do. The physical body has the ability to see those multidimensional scales, but they're not able to see them with scientific instrumentation. But we are dealing with an overlay structure of 12 DNA strands, most of which are dormant. Okay? Some of this knowledge has been kept alive in our cultures since ancient times. It was protected in the ancient mystery schools. There were mystery schools in Egypt that protected a large portion of it. There were Hebrew mystery schools that protected a large portion of it. But nobody had the full picture of what was going on. Some of them understood the concept of triggering things in the DNA to make evolution accelerate, and also to be able to move your consciousness and your body out of this three-dimensional field. But it was a very hush-hush science, and everybody's trying to figure out exactly how it worked. They had the pieces, but nobody seemed to have the whole plan. We are very, very gifted in our time, because the beings of higher evolution, which do exist, who do know these things, they have kept this knowledge from us for a long time in order for us to evolve to a point where we were peaceful beings. And once we had the power that this knowledge would give us, we wouldn't go and destroy other systems. And that's why it has been kept from us. In the time period we're in, because some of the things that we're coming up on in the next 18 years, a decision was made in the councils of higher evolution that this information would be given because the continued quality of our survival would be dependent on whether or not we could learn certain things very quickly and create activations in our DNA. If we can activate certain portions of the dormant silicate matrix, we will be able to accommodate certain electromagnetic changes that are going to happen on the planet much better than if we did not do those activations. So the class that that we give, it's interesting how all of you are part of, has been a very private class, just dealing with the processes of bringing the beginnings of these activations about. There's no books on this yet, just my personal notes for the classes, so this is like, right off the press material. In today's class, I wanted to introduce a couple of things. And the first thing, I think I am going to follow the protocol on this. I'm going to flip back and forth and talk a little bit about spiritual integration and what that means, and then a little bit about DNA activation. And then we'll bring those two together, hopefully, where we can see it's all part of the same process, because it is. Now, the evolution of the DNA occurs through something called frequency accretion. That means we are pulling in to our energy field. I'll leave it at that word for right now. We're pulling into our personal energy field frequency patterns from the dimensions in which we reside. Now, the energy field I'm talking about is called a morphogenetic field. The morphogenetic field is a crystalline latticework of sound tones and light patterns, standing wave patterns, which are scalar patterns, that exists before the form manifestation of dimensionalized particles exists. So the process of evolving upward, evolving our DNA, but also our consciousness, is accreting or bringing in frequency from the unified field of energy in the dimensions around us into our morphogenetic field and expanding that morphogenetic field to contain what was outside is now within. This is where a lot of the spiritual concepts of it is all within you. This is where they come from, because as you bring more and more of the dimensional frequencies into you, less and less is manifest outside of you. You will enter in highest evolution, you will enter levels where body forms are not real. They were remembered as illusions that you once walked around in. And you will remember what it felt like to be in a hologram of three-dimensional reality. So there are levels of consciousness that each one of you have right now. They exist simultaneously with you. And you only seem separate from them because you are in a certain particle pulsation rhythm and in a certain morphogenetic field form. This form can expand by evolving its DNA. When you evolve the DNA by bringing in frequency from the unified field, that frequency is not just dead energy. This is the kind of secret to all the concepts of God that people say, oh, everybody's separate from God. You can't be separate from God because every particle in the dimensional frequency bands, every particle of everything that exists is a unit in the consciousness of God. We are made of the substance of God. The dimensions are made of the substance of God. So the energy we are dealing with when we're talking about frequency bands and these kind of scientific things, we're also talking about consciousness. When we bring in frequency bands from the dimensional unified fields, we are bringing consciousness into our morphogenetic field, and we are integrating, reintegrating what we once lost. For to get down here into these smaller forms of biology, we had to leave portions of ourself behind in the dimensional unified fields. And the process of evolution at this point is reversing the process and going back upward and pulling back into yourself the portions of your identity that you left at the unified fields. Mm-hmm. This is what we're doing with DNA accretion, and this is what all of the spiritual traditions, I don't care what they call themselves, this is the real purpose behind any spiritual belief system, the ultimate purpose. There are distortions that have been given to keep us from finding this purpose, but the purpose of our evolution is to reintegrate what we once were and to reestablish our connection not just with God, but as part of what God is. It's called the I am that I am. When you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I am God, and realize you're not doing blasphemy. You're not saying, oh, I'm God, I'm some ego trip person. No, it's not about that. It's about achieving a total harmonization of your own consciousness with the consciousness of all that exists. You cannot express exactly what that means while you're down here. You can hint at it, you can get words to lead you up to it. It's a cognition level that, with the DNA strand codes here, you can't bring all of those frequencies of cognition in. It'll help to understand the evolution process if you realize when you bring in frequency, you bring in consciousness. So the more frequency you bring in, the more conscious you become, that kind of thing. Now, there are processes involved with evolving up through the dimensional scale. Some of them are extremely complex energy dynamics that I look at and I say, yeah, right, I'm gonna try to teach this. I don't think so. Transduce it, make it a little simpler, where it's useful to me and where it's useful to the other people who might respond to this. And they have tried to do that. The Guardian Lines have tried to do that. They are dealing with levels of consciousness. They're dealing with levels of DNA activation, some of them, that are still in body forms, that are far beyond ours, so they can hold more information within their conscious identity than we can. So we try to take their information, put it down here, and it's like we're just too small to squeeze it all into the gene code to translate. So sometimes it's hard to translate. But there are some very specific parts of the multidimensional anatomy of your being that if you know that they're there, it'll help you to integrate them more quickly. And it'll help you to see what the evolutionary roadmap is. And it'll help you to choose what way you want to go with it. Now, a lot of people, it's very popular in the New Age movement to talk about a concept of the light body. What is the light body? Some people think, oh, the body of light, obviously. The light body is actually a very, very specific thing. And interestingly enough, the body you're walking around in is part of it. This is part of your light body too. Okay? There are levels to the light body that correspond directly to the frequency bands of a 15-dimensional matrix. Okay, there are 5 light bodies, or extensions of what our identity is, forms our identity takes, within dimensions 1 through 15. We have in dimensions 1, 2, 3, which is where we are. They call the body we're walking around in the tarnic body. The identity level is called the tarn, or the incarnate. And that's composed, it's a three-dimensional identity. It has three dimensions of consciousness aware in its biological form. Now, there is a level of identity that would be the next we would evolve into. That is called the Doratic body, or the Dora. Some people call it the soul, or the soul matrix. That is also a three-dimensional body, and it has matter, which a lot of people don't realize. That is also a matter system. The soul matrix, the Doratic body, is composed of dimensions 4, 5, and 6. And if you were at a station of awareness, which are what the bodies represent, if you were in your Doratic body at its fullest height, you would be a six-dimensional consciousness. Some people consider those the angelic consciousness. That's the kind of like the break-off point, 6 and above, your angels. That's what the old term meant, that they were referring to those levels of higher evolution. This is what we're going to progress into. This is what our race was designed to progress into, and it's what it once was. Now, after you get out of D4, 5, and 6, there's another level of body, and that's the Metatronic body. That corresponds to a level of identity you'd call the Oversoul. And this connects you directly to Dimension 8, which is, after you go up to the 15, you come down, back through, and you can leave dimensionalization completely into completely higher levels that are even beyond dimensionalized consciousness. Now, after, that's three bodies that we've went through. After the third body, you have something called a hydronic body. This, they call it hydronic, and that has a little similarity to the concept of water, maybe. They call it this because it's composed of the dimensional frequency bands of 10, 11, and 12, which is pre-matter substance. Now, pre-matter substance is, the closest you could compare it to, is liquid crystalline light. So it's a more liquid form than a matter form would be. It's not like heavy water like we have here. It's like liquid light. Try to imagine what that would be. It is a density level between here and non-density. Okay, so the hadronic body goes into a form of liquid light, and that's not where it stops. After that, when you get into evolving into dimensions 13, 14, and 15, you're dealing with the antiparticle body. This is not the antiparticle body, which is the opposite of you in your parallel universe. It's the antiparticle. When you put an antiparticle and a particle and antiparticle together, they fuse and they transmute, and they become a photonic form of radiation. They become antimatter, and that is one of the original forms that our consciousness dwelled within before it downscaled itself into the lower pulsating fields of time that matter happens within. Okay, so am I getting across to the group just a little of the process we're involved here? You know, for the new people that it's plugging in good. Okay, so now the hadronic body, by the way, is the name of the body that would go with your 13, 14, and 15 dimensional consciousness. Now, these are the names of the bodies. There are stations of awareness that also go with them. The tonic body of this dimension is the incarnate personality. And this is a new model for psychology. For anybody who might be, interested in the field of psychology, here's a model of multidimensional, 15-dimensional energy structure that will show you everything from where your subpersonalities fit to where you fit with God, and all the steps in between. So it's a pretty good program, pretty good model. The next level up, the Doratic body, that is what is commonly known as your soul. There are three levels to it. It's a three-dimensional part of your being. So you have a soul body. Now the soul body is composed of the astral identity in D4. It's composed of the archetype identity in D5. And it's composed of what's called either the celestial or the angelic identity of D6. So the next stage in your evolution is embodying the next level of yourself, which is the soul matrix. After you do that, you will be evolving the Metatronic body, which corresponds to your oversoul level of awareness. And there are very precise structures within these, which I won't elaborate on a lot tonight because we'll get lost on the important, neat stuff that I want to introduce tonight because some of it's real exciting. I'm excited about it. But I just want you to understand that we have a progression of body imprints. Some of them look like us with physical form, but as you go up in the dimensional scale, that form expands and changes. Now, when you're in what we call harmonic universe 1, which is dimensions 1, 2, and 3. You're dealing with matter level 1, let's say, matter density level 1. When you accrete frequency to the point where you can become part of harmonic universe 2 and expand your morphogenetic field to where it can hold dimensions 4, 5, and 6, you are in a different level of matter density. It's still matter, it's still physically solid, but it's much lighter than this. There is the ratio between particles and dense particles and light particles is almost reversed as to what it is here. There's more light particles than there are density particles. It's a really neat space to be. I remember incarnations in this space, and I remember going there. There's things you can do with your consciousness to travel there even while you're in a body here. It is a very special type of existence because of the level of matter density. Now, when you go up to the next level, where you become an embodied oversoul, you still have, if you choose, a body form, but it is not of a matter density that we would know. You could compare it to like a ghost body. You know how they're kind of transparent. It's called an etheric body. It's an energy body imprint, and it can hold the form of the thought form you hold. If you want to look like this in your etheric body, yes, you can. If you want to look like a tree, you can do that too. You can rearrange yourself more and what you look like more when you progress upward in the dimensional scale. You have more flexibility of form. You're not as fixed, and it's called phase lock when you're stuck into a certain set of dimensional bands and stuck into the form that's characteristic of those bands. As you evolve, you release phase lock from HU1, harmonic universe 1, and you evolve to harmonic universe 2. And this progresses all the way up. When you get to harmonic universe 5, the level of consciousness there is called the Rishi. And it's a level of identity that can't even embody here. Even if you plugged in all of your light bodies, you can't fully embody a Rishi identity, but it can be with you and you can be connected and communicate with that level of self. It's an antimatter form. You are living radiation, which is a neat state to be. And it's imagine, it's hard to imagine actually, your consciousness as just fully spreading throughout the whole universe, endless, ceaseless. There is no end to it. There's no boundaries. And you just cognate all of it. This is the beginning of what it means to be a really evolved being. This is the higher evolution beings that I'm speaking of. There are beings out there, and there always have been, that are at these levels. And portions of our own identities are still out there. Okay. Now, when we get past evolving through the 5 bodies that are in the 15-dimensional matrix, there are 3 bodies called the Useta bodies. These correspond to an energy structure that's called the energy matrix. The time matrix, with all of its 24 15-dimensional systems and 5 harmonic universes each, takes place within the energy matrix. The energy matrix is bigger. And the energy matrix is what's directly connected to a central creative source. You could even call it the spark of the consciousness of God if you wanted to. It is a central creative force, source, and intelligence. It does not have a form as far as energy forms or body forms. Now, the Useta bodies, there are 3 of them. They correspond to the 3 levels of the energy matrix between the 15-dimensional matrix and getting back to that core point. These are levels of what in spiritual tradition are called ascended masters. All right, when you hear that term a lot in the New Age movement, oh, the ascended master group, what is this? I mean, if you happen to make it to the 5th dimension, you can say you're an ascended master, but that doesn't mean you are. There is a real meaning behind the term ascended master. And it's not just ascending to the next level in your framework here. Ascended mastery, to really bear that title, is an identity who has accreted into its morphogenetic imprint, into its morph field, all of the 15-dimensional matrices, okay, all of its 15-dimensional identity. It has gone back through its center point at dimension 8 and left the time matrices and entered back into the energy matrix. Then the first level of ascended mastery it will experience is called the Merkaba body. Now, it's not the same thing as the word Merkaba. It means similar things as far as the geometric configurations that are involved. But the Merkaba body will be the first level of ascended mastery you'll experience. After that, this one's hard to pronounce. It's the Sukma Dateya body. That is the next level in towards Source. And the final one is called the Eka body. And that is the one that will connect you directly towards Source. Now, once you evolve through all of this seemingly endless, structures, and you get to that point, then what? Do you stop there and say, well, do you lose your consciousness? Do you lose your sentience? No, you don't just blend with this nowness and lose any concept of what you were, any more than if you look back on your childhood from here. You know that child was real. You love that child. It was valid. And you know yourself as a point that grew from that child. And you're much happier to be the adult at this point because you know more. It's the same kind of feeling. And you are able to experience in it one-ment with the creative source that can take you into things you just can't explain here. But you will retain your sentient consciousness and the history of your own identity as it evolved through time. So it's a very special experience. This is what the process of evolution through dimensional ascension is about. And the funny thing is you don't have to believe in it for it to happen. Because anybody who's here evolving, whether they're doing it consciously or unconsciously, this is what you're involved in. I mean, you can't get off this bus. You are evolving. You can de-evolve if you want to. And you can go right back as far down as you can into space dust and little units of consciousness that are all fragmented apart with no direct sentient identity. But the natural process of the universe is to rebundle them into conscious forms and allow them to evolve. So eventually you're going to get there, even if you don't want to believe you're evolving. So we are involved in the process of dimensional ascension, progressive dimensional ascension. This is exciting news for us from what we've been taught in school in our scientific classes. We haven't been taught anything about this. The most significant, important thing in our lives, the fact that, for one, you don't die when you die, you go on. For two, there's a very precise process to this, and there are all these things to look forward to. We're not taught any of these things. So to have a framework where personal identity can be understood, where the DNA fits in with that, where science and religion come together, that is a very exciting thing. And I'm very grateful for the Guardian Alliance for providing that framework. They have a very harmonious cultural relationship within their many systems, and it's because they understand these things. When you understand these things, you begin to understand the interrelationship of all life. And then you realize if you hurt something else, you are still hurting yourself. And eventually, you will hurt yourself enough to realize this. So there's a process of love that takes place, of just inner cognition and a love for the things outside of you, because you realize they're really just extensions of what's inside of you. So there are many things to look forward to in this process of dimensional ascension. Now, as we move up the dimensional scale and integrate the next level, next level is our soul matrix. We want to integrate that. What does this mean in terms of our DNA? It means something very precise. It means that the 4th, 5th, and 6th DNA strand imprints that correspond to the dimensional frequency bands of the 4, 5, and 6, which are the soul matrix, have to become activated within the physical body, or you will not be able to embody the consciousness of the soul matrix in the physical body. Now, it can take many, many lifetimes of incarnations to assemble and activate DNA strands. That's what the reincarnational cycles are about here. We're progressively and very slowly building DNA strand code activation so the next level of our awareness can integrate, and then slowly the next level. The object of all of this is to get us to the point where we can leave the incarnational cycles and return to what we were right before that. Not what we were, eons ago, but what we were right before that. Right before we ended up in these forms, we were in an immortal body form, and that was the 12-strand silicate matrix DNA configuration. The body was immortal. Disease did not happen. We had conscious control over these things. This is what we can evolve into now. It's not going to happen overnight. There's a very precise process of energetic activations that take place, and it will depend on where your DNA is at to begin with, how fast your body will respond to these programs. But the potential's here, aside from the fact that it's going to really make a difference for people here between 2000 and 2017, aside from those facts, which we've gotten into in other tapes, it has the potential to allow us full control over our physical forms and over the forms we manifest out here through our physical forms. So if things like ascension cycles that we've talked about and seven seals opening and vortices and things like some of the other tapes have addressed, which are coming up for us in the next 18 years. If they don't rattle our cages enough to make us pay attention, maybe some real selfish motives, or wouldn't it be really neat to be able to completely control what my body looked like, or how it felt, or how it performed. These things are in our reach, but not with our present DNA code activation level. So, there are many reasons to participate consciously in accelerating genetic evolution. We're being presented with an opportunity to do it right now that wouldn't normally happen, because there are certain frequencies that are needed to purge mutations that have happened in our DNA strand in the silicate matrix. They're becoming available because of certain planetary cycles. There are going to be literal wave patterns moving through from the solar light spectrum that will allow us to activate certain things in the DNA that we couldn't otherwise. Okay. Now, I'm going to jump from basically rehashing some of the stuff that was in the earlier classes into some of the heavier material. And I'm hoping I can bridge this fast enough. I think we have the energy pulse up here enough that we can plug this in. Mm-hmm. All right. There's something within the body, a structure within the body, that in spiritual traditions it's often called the inner arc of the covenant. Mm-hmm. What's that? We don't know what the outer arc is. In my Mente book, we get into what the outer arc of the covenant is, and it is a frequency bridge, and it's a time portal passage. And that's all we need to talk about as far as the outer arc goes. Now, the inner arc of the covenant is a potential held within our morphogenetic field. There's a very specific structure to our morphogenetic field. Things are laid out in a certain way, just like you'd lay out the plans of a house. The inner arc of the covenant is a dormant, crystalline area of energy within our morphogenetic field that corresponds to our pineal gland. Okay? Now, our scientists say, well, pineal gland is dormant, it doesn't do anything. Not right now, it doesn't, but it can. And part of activating the silicate matrix is beginning the activation phases of the pineal gland, because that will create, and they call it the arc of the covenant, because it creates arcs of energy, arcs of light that go through different chakra points and hit different parts of the morphogenetic field in the head. It creates a form of scalar wave antenna, we might say. It's able to bring in higher frequencies from the unified fields around us, from the atmosphere, from the things that are coming in from space. When you activate these things, what these higher frequencies allow you to do is to bring in the frequencies that will activate your DNA so more of your soul matrix can embody. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole interrelated process here. Now, within the inner arc of the covenant, the area of the morphogenetic field that allows us the ability to accelerate the silicate matrix, there is something that in spiritual traditions has often been called the crown jewel. That you've heard of that, huh? That is actually, in the morphogenetic structure, something called the 11th Kathara sphere. The crown jewel allows for the activation of the soul matrix, and I will say codes, and I'll explain those a little better later, to become part of the physical body codes, which will accelerate the evolution of the DNA. Now, let's say, I'm going to skip here. Okay. I'm going to get into, now I'm going to skip over this little bit and try to pull what I think will work best. Okay, I'm going to go over morphogenetic structure first. Okay, I did describe before we have a morphogenetic field. Now, in earlier classes, we learned it's a crystalline structure of energy, crystallized sound light patterns that form something called chelons, which are, if you saw them, they would look like crystals, if you would held a cluster of crystals in your hand. Well, you have a level of your body and your identity that is composed of crystalline structures, and we call it the crystal body. When I refer to the morphogenetic field, I'm referring to your chelon crystal body, and you have 15 dimensions worth of it. So each of those levels of your light body are actually part of the crystalline chelon body. Now, there are two primary levels if you want to learn to deal with the DNA and deal with the morphogenetic fields to have more control over what your DNA in your body is doing and your cell integration process is doing. One of the first level of the morphogenetic field is called the Cathara level. And there's something called the Cathara grid, which is the layout of how the crystallized frequencies are placed in order to allow energy to refract in certain patterns so that matter forms can build up on them. And all matter forms have a bit different type of Cathara grid. Now, the human Cathara grid was originally created to hold 12 dimensions of consciousness. We were intended to be able to hold in biology our oversoul level of identity. And that made us kind of unique in the universe because a lot of beings didn't have the potential to hold that many dimensional bands of consciousness within one form. So the Cathara grid, and this is going to be fun, this is one of the secrets to some of the ancient teachings that have been with us for many, many years and have many, many interpretations. Here's another one. And I kind of like this one because it's a secret that was hidden within this diagram. Anybody recognize this diagram? Anybody not recognize this diagram? Most people probably will. Okay, this is the tree of life. Okay? Now, if you will notice, and for people who are really familiar with the tree of life, there are usually 10 circles on it. We have 12. There's a reason for that. And before I explain the reason why we have 12, I need to explain to you what they are. Now this is exciting stuff because if you learn this and if you learn the stuff that's on the next diagram, you'll have an understanding of how you can directly influence your DNA strands. And that's exciting. This is a roadmap to your DNA, and that's, I'm very excited, so pardon me for saying that too many times. Okay, now these circles, which I believe in the traditional interpretations are called Sephiroth, we simply call them Cathara spheres. They're composites of frequency tones that form crystallizations that take on a spherical form. And within your body, there are positions within the morphogenetic level of your body that these spheres exist. Now, the 12th sphere, which is the big one, the 12th sphere holds in it the codes for the whole silicate matrix 12-strand DNA pattern. All right, that exists within the 10th chakra. Now, we have dealt with the 10th chakra in earlier classes. We probably use a different system than many that might be out there. If anybody has the blue book, there's the diagram of the chakras and the star crystal seals. Cindy, would you mind looking that up and just kind of like showing it around so you can show where the 10th chakra is? The 10th chakra is about 6 inches up above the head. Okay, so the 12th Cathara sphere is located in the 10th chakra. Now, going downward, the 11th Cathara sphere is located in the pineal. This is your crown jewel. This is what connects you to the 12th one. Now, the 12th one is often called the capstone because when you fully activate the codes, the electromagnetic frequencies that are contained within that, you have control over your entire gene code. You can embody your oversoul. You can transmute into the next harmonic universe or right into the etheric level of the universes. You have complete mastery over matter density levels, and that's awesome. I don't have it. I'm not activated there, but it's a potential I'd love to try. Okay, now coming downward, we have the 9th and 10th Cathara spheres. Now, the 9th and 10th are located in the head. They're actually part of the acupressure point system. If you, like in Chinese medicine or Japanese medicine, they have acupressure points. There are 2 points somewhere right upward and behind the ears a little bit. And if you play around with your skull a little, you can feel them. They're a little soft, and they just have a feel. Like you feel a little bit of strange energy push on it when you push your fingers on it. Different. It's not as hard as the other spots. Okay, the 9th and 10th Cathara spheres are located back there. Now, it helps to understand where they are for several reasons. For one, you can stimulate them by direct touch or projecting energy into them. For two, if you're going to be reprogramming anything that's in them, to reprogram your DNA from the morphogenetic level, you want to know where it is so you can direct the energy the right way. Okay? Now, everybody got to take one of these home, so you get to have the map to your morphogenetic level 1 with you. But, all right, now, The 8th catharosphere is located right down in here in the region of what we have marked as the 8th chakra on our chakra diagrams. And it's also in the area of the thyroid. And it affects the thyroid gland directly. So when the frequencies that are contained within the 8th catharosphere begin to activate, they will affect the thyroid and thus the metabolic rate. And they will affect, and that will also create another arc with the pineal gland. So you will have energy dynamics taking place that will shift the metabolic rates of the body. It'll shift the breathing rate, the heart rate. It will shift all sorts of things that we consider the autonomic processes that supposedly we have no control over. Well, these are the control buttons to these processes, and they do operate automatically through the programs that are contained within the catharospheres, which manifest into the DNA. Now, the 6th and 7th catharospheres, these are, I call these the angel wings, because they're located right around here in kind of like the hollow indent. You can push around. There's more. Again, they're on acupressure points. You can find them if you push, because they usually hurt a little. They're usually a little tender, and they will go out the back. They run all the way through where you can feel them on both sides, like around the wing bones in the back. You can feel them on both sides. Okay, so that's where they are. Now, the 5th is located at the navel. The 4th and 3rd, in a female, it's located over the ovaries, and in a male, it's located in the same position, but he doesn't have ovaries. Okay, so it's in the same positions down around the hip bone areas. Okay, the 2nd one, on a female, it is located actually within the birth canal, and with a male, it's located right, very, very close to the prostrate gland. It's not in it, but it's very, very close to the prostrate gland. And the 1st catharosphere is located actually at the Earth's core. And it connects you to the race morphogenetic field, and it connects you to the Earth morphogenetic field. So your morphogenetic field, which you can visualize as a crystal Keelan body that looks something like that, is connected to your physical body and to other things that you don't quite see yet, like the Earth's core and higher dimensions. This one will connect you to the 13th dimension, where you connect to a whole other one of these that's called the universal tree of life, that takes you completely out of the dimensional matrix. While you're in a body, all you need to worry down here, all you need to worry about is first activating this area, and then later this will be your soul matrix. And as you pull these, as you pull these in, then you will activate these, which will bring in your oversoul level of identity. And then you'll pull in these, where you'll bring in your avatar level of identity. And then you'll tap into your rishi level of identity and begin transmutation completely out of form. But you don't have to worry about that now. What we need to think about now is, okay, what can we do with that knowledge? There's got to be something useful we can get out of that. And there is, if we understand the correspondences of the catharospheres to the DNA strands. Now, we have 12 DNA strands. There's the diagram of the chakra systems. If anybody'd like to see it, you can pass that around for anybody who hasn't seen the blue book. That will be in the Amente book, Volume 2. That's going to be published. Okay. Now, the catharospheres are the first morphogenetic imprint for the DNA strand. So catharosphere 1 will hold the program for the base codes and what's called the acceleration codes, or the magnetic and the electrical heli of DNA strand 1. So if you want to be able to change a program or a mutation that's occurring in DNA strand 1, that is the sphere that you would use. Same goes for every one of these. Okay? All of these correspond to the 12 DNA strands. Now, there are tricks that can be done as far as activating DNA and purging mutations from DNA. The main central vertical line is the control line of the catharogrid. So the catharospheres, which are 12, 11, 8, 5, 2, and 1, they are the control spheres that will control the programs in all the other spheres. Now, if you want to reprogram what's down here, you can start up here, but that would be too high frequency. You will not plug it in to the body. You have to start at they start at the middle point, which is your point of coming into manifestation here. When you're dealing with these levels, you're dealing with the avatar level of identity. They go from the 8 point, which corresponds to the center point in the 15-dimensional matrix, the 8. They're moving downward from that. They're taking that 8 point. The codes that are contained, the electromagnetic signatures of energy that are contained within the 8th sphere, they set the pattern for the 8th strand. But the 8th strand contains within it all strands below it. So, if you want to straighten out any of these codes, you use that one. And you can reprogram all of the lower codes and reprogram out mutations in the strands by using the 8th sphere. And that's what we will be doing during the solar activation. Now, the course that we're a part of right now, this is one of 6 courses, each having 12 classes and an orientation class and an ending kind of ceremony where we have an activation. So this is not a process that you go, hey, I know it now, I can make it happen overnight. It takes a while. And it plugs into the other diagram that I have here someplace. Where'd that one go? I had to. Yeah, there it is. Okay. This, I love the name of this. All right, if you look at this diagram, it has a very funny name. It looks like like Betcher vacuum cleaner. It's like Betcher Hoover, but it's not pronounced that way. It's pronounced it's pronounced Beta Hoover. And the Beta Hoover is actually a very ancient term that refers to certain levels of initiation through which you leave dimensionalized reality. Okay, so this is called the Beta Hoover key. And it's called the key because what it gives you is the literal diagram of the 12 strands of the silicate matrix gene code and how they plug into each other. Now, if you will look, I have a series of darker dots and lighter dots, and each are marked off as part of one strand. Now, the darker dots represent the magnetic heli in that strand, and it contains 12 base codes. The electrical heli, which is the light dots in that strand, contains 12 acceleration codes. The base codes and the acceleration codes have a sound equivalent. They are both subtones, and when they combine, they form a full tone. So if you combine the 12 and 12, you have 24 pieces right now, you combine them, you end up with 12 full tones. Now, what's really fun, I love this part for some reason. I think I've probably been working on it for many incarnations. When the tones are combined, so you have your base codes, which are a bass tone, and you have your acceleration codes, which are an overtone. You combine a bass tone and an overtone, you get a resonant tone. There's your full tone. Now, those full tones were represented in many of our ancient teachings. They actually followed some of the patternings of the original Hebrew alphabet. They were expressed in the Hebrew language. There were various languages. Basically, 5 languages are programmed into the DNA, but when it comes to the primary language that held the energy signatures, that controlled the primary 12 tones, it was the Hebrew language that controlled the 12 tones. And if there was any subtones or smaller energy imprints, there were other languages that applied to those. So if you wanted to get, in the old days, it worked that if you wanted to get control over your DNA code and how to handle it, you'd need the map, for one, to know where the strands were, what they meant, how they corresponded to these, which we'll get to in a minute. And you would need to know the codes, what sound tones these were. The sound tones were expressed in terms of the letters of the alphabet, of the Hebrew alphabet, but it has been eons since the correct sequences of those letters have been given. And many, many scholars, from what I understand, have been spending many, many eons trying to find out what the sequences of what they call the fire letters are. The fire letters, which are addressed in things like the Keys of Enoch and those kind of things. The fire letters are the 12 tones, the primary 12 tones. There's many more than that, but each strand has 12 primary tones or fire letters. They're light symbol codes, and they actually start out as light. That's why they're called fire letters. They later turn to sound when they become activated in the DNA, and this is something that, this was new to me. I knew a little bit about the fire letters, but this was a new part. When the codes are not fully activated in a DNA strand, they exist within the morphogenetic field as a standing wave pattern, a scalar wave. They exist as light. When those patterns of light get intersected by certain patterns of sound, things happen. And one of the things that happens is they come from dormancy as a standing wave pattern within the DNA strand, an imprint, into the active DNA strand as a dormant sound tone. But at least it's into the active physical DNA strand now. Then it has to be activated once it's there. But you can, masters of the Behuva, know how to program anything in to their DNA. They can manifest anything right through their bodies. They can manifest events. They can manifest worlds. We're not that good. We're just working on knowing enough about it to be able to activate things in the DNA and to reverse mutate other things that are going to stop the activations from taking place. The reason it's so important right now is because we are entering a time acceleration. There's a condition called molecular compaction that the body will experience if it does not accelerate its particle pulsation rhythm. There's one way to accelerate the body's particle pulsation rhythm high enough to not have any negative effects from this time acceleration, and that is to activate the DNA to a 4.5 strand level accretion. That means 4.5 strands need to activate. We're still roaming around thinking we have 2, that's it. I mean, so it's important that we begin to understand the structure. It's not just, oh, gee, maybe I'll play with my DNA tonight. There is a real reason for it. Now, we're not all going to fall over and die from molecular compaction. It doesn't exactly work that way. It's much more subtle. Molecular compaction occurs because during the next 18 years, there are numerous things happening, which I'm not going to get heavily into in this tape, but there are increased interdimensional scalar wave patterns moving into the Earth's grid. There are interdimensional electromagnetic wave patterns that our grid is not used to having. We are going to get infusions of D4, D5, D6, 7, 8, and 9 frequency into the Earth's grid and into the Earth's crust and its core and our bioenergetic fields between now and 2017. If your morphogenetic field, because it's blocked by not having the right codes to allow it to expand to hold those frequencies will push in on the crystalline lattice work of the blueprint that your body is built on. And it will begin to poke holes in it, just as if you had a glass in your hand and you squeezed it too tight. The frequencies coming in become pressure on the crystalline lattice work of the body. And after a certain point, it will begin to, and like I said, it's not right away. It's not you're going to fall over and get a horrible disease tomorrow or anything. It will be a progressive acceleration of the aging and deterioration process. That's what will come of it. And it will affect everyone differently. It depends on where your DNA is. If you're of a higher resonating code and you're able to expand and take in more of those scalar wave patterns, you won't show much of the results. Some people will be able to use it to actually activate higher strands, where they're actually get younger. They'll be in better health. But others will get stuck within the lower DNA strand counts, and the first effects would be, they said, within the bone structure. You would begin to get weakness in bone and teeth and that kind of thing. And the next would be within the immune system. And they didn't tell me after that, what would be the results. That's enough, and I've already experienced some of it myself. I've had experiences of being exposed through my experiences with the Guardians, being taken places, I've been taken through portals, so I know what it feels like. That's scalar wave exposure. And I have had things like teeth break right after. Just break for no reason. So it does happen. I'm not an example of what will happen to everybody because I've been on the extreme course because I've been taken all over the place and really exposed to interdimensional frequencies. But this is something that's worth thinking about, not getting real scared about, oh my God, it's going to, I'm going to die of molecular compaction. There are worse things that could happen because as long as you know you can just get out of your body and, go on to the next level when you cross over. But we can actually learn to use this increase of energy that's coming to our planet to improve our condition rather than to let it tear us down. And that's where understanding the grids comes in. Now, I'll explain some of it a bit more. I'm probably not going to be able to cover all of the points of it because I'm never I'm never able to cover as much as I'd like as I do in writing. That's why I give you these, so you can also, take what I have said in the verbal discussion and then read it here, and it'll make twice as much sense.